Here's what happened across the U.S. in the past hour, all in 60 seconds. The U.S. military struck ISIL targets in Syria after an ambush killed 2 U.S. soldiers and a civilian interpreter. Officials said the airstrikes targeted multiple ISIL sites. President Trump declared a national emergency to shield Venezuelan oil proceeds held in U.S. accounts from creditors. The order blocks most court actions unless Treasury grants a license. The State Department urged Americans to leave Venezuela, citing reports of armed colectivos at roadblocks searching cars. Officials warned conditions remain volatile after the raid that captured Nicolas Maduro. After ICE officer Jonathan Ross fatally shot Renee Good, lawmakers pushed for tighter oversight and limits on ICE operations. Some Democrats floated funding cuts or impeachment for DHS Secretary Kristi Noem. Police in Clay County, Mississippi, arrested Derica Moore after 6 people were killed at 3 sites, including a 7-year-old girl. Officials said capital charges are possible. The State Department said the U.S. will withdraw from 66 international organizations and stop funding them. Marco Rubio said the move ends blank checks and shifts spending to U.S. priorities. U.S. officials said President Trump was briefed on strike options against Iran as protests spread and Tehran tightened its crackdown. The White House said no decision has been made. Here's what happened across the U.S. in the past hour, all in 60 seconds. Anti-ICE demonstrations were planned across the U.S. on Saturday after Renee Nicole Good was shot and killed in Minneapolis by an ICE agent. Police said they're preparing for large crowds. President Donald Trump is scheduled to visit Detroit on Tuesday, January 13, to speak at the Detroit Economic Club. It would be his first trip to Michigan since April 2025. Heritage Foundation released a report calling for federal policies to promote marriage and family formation. The plan includes a marriage boot camp, a day of rest, and a requirement that agencies measure family impacts. Missouri Secretary of State Denny Hoskins acknowledged in court that he wrote a ballot summary that could prejudice voters against a referendum on the state's new congressional map. A judge is reviewing the challenge. After an ICE agent fatally shot Renee Good in Minneapolis, Reps Ilhan Omar, Angie Craig, and Kelly Morrison were denied entry to a nearby ICE facility. DHS cited a new 7-day notice policy. Pete Hegseth visited Rocket Lab in Los Angeles County during his Arsenal of Freedom tour, focused on the Defense Industrial Base. He urged faster work to expand U.S. space and satellite capabilities. Mamdani and Hochul announced a $1.7 billion plan to expand New York City's 3K and start free care for 2-year-olds in priority neighborhoods. Pre-K for 4-year-olds statewide is slated to be universal by 2028-20. Here's what happened across the U.S. in the past hour, all in 60 seconds. U.S. officials said President Trump was briefed in recent days on military strike options against Iran as protests continue and Tehran tightens its crackdown. The White House says no final decision has been made. A Heritage Foundation report urged the U.S. government to prioritize marriage and family formation. It proposes a marriage boot camp, a universal day of rest, and agency reviews of how policies affect families. Missouri Secretary of State Denny Hoskins told a judge he wrote a ballot summary likely to prejudice voters on a gerrymandering referendum. The court is considering whether the wording must be changed. Protests against ICE spread to Minneapolis and other U.S. cities this week after Renee Good was fatally shot during a federal operation. Minnesota officials opened a separate review as federal investigators defend the shooting. U.S. Central Command says it carried out large-scale strikes on multiple ISIL targets across Syria this week. The attacks followed an ambush near Palmyra that killed 2 U.S. soldiers and a civilian interpreter. Rights groups say Venezuela has released at least 18 detainees described as political prisoners in recent days. Advocates say hundreds remain jailed and are pressing for a broader, transparent release process. Authorities in Clay County, Mississippi, charged 24-year-old Derica Moore with 6 counts of murder after shootings at 3 locations. Investigators say 6 people, including a 7-year-old girl, were killed and Moore is in custody. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth visited Rocket Lab in Los Angeles County as part of his Arsenal of Freedom tour. He urged faster work to expand U.S. satellite and rocket production for the military.